Hopefully you've already heard a whole lot of stuff that's got you inspired to leave here and get out of the building and talk to customers. So that's great. You've already heard a lot of great talks this morning. One of the things that has struck me, and from my background a little bit, I've worked with startups for the past a lot of years, getting to the point where I don't want to say the number. But most of those startups have also been working within enterprises, selling to enterprises. And one of the things I found is that there is a huge variance of the problems that you have, whether you're at very early stage, to you're sort of a medium company, you have customers, to you're an enterprise and you are used to moving full steam ahead, and you've been doing this for 30 years and you're making billions of dollars. So there's a huge range of the problems that people face, but the solutions actually are very similar from customer to customer. There are some things that you can't do in your startup, there's some things that you can't do in your enterprise, but a lot fewer than people would think. And so I could get up here and talk about things that I do at Yammer, or things that I do with the startups I advise, or Microsoft, but honestly, if you follow me on Twitter, you've probably heard a lot of them, and also you heard some of this last year. And more interestingly, I know, because I know about customer development, that people like talking about themselves and their own problems. So what I did for this session was actually to put out a survey and ask people to volunteer to come forward and say, stand up, tell me your customer development challenges, and I will, on the spot, help you try and figure out what you can do to go forward. And my hope is that this will be more interesting than a bunch of slides would have been, even the funny slides. Also, they've made us promise not to swear too much in these talks, so I gotta lean on other things here. So, to kick that off, I'm just going to go through, and I've got my handy list on my phone so I don't forget who people are, and I'll find someone, and they'll stand up and talk about their customer development challenges, and we'll spend a couple minutes talking about what they could try next. So, first up, Peter. Peter, where are you? All right, let's walk over, and just tell me a little bit about the stage of your company and your biggest customer development challenge.
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity. So our company's 30 years old. We've been making barcode data collection software for the enterprise space, so companies use our product in warehouses and manufacturing and in retail to receive product moved around. Getting into those customers and finding out what else we can do for them sounds like, oh, you should be able to do that easily. But it's been very challenging because every customer wants it their way. And all their software's on-premise, modified to hell and back. And so that's been our challenge in a nutshell.
All right, so we've got a mature company. We've got a company that's something that a lot of us might not think is super high tech, but is super critical. And then trying to figure out how can we get to our customers and talk to them. So one of the things that I've said a lot of times that can be a useful hack is bringing in a new person. So if you're talking to a customer who's been your customer for 20 years and they have a certain relationship with you and your meetings go a certain way, bringing in someone who's a completely new person, sometimes that person can be a new employee if you happen to have one. If not, you can pick a confederate who's just someone they haven't seen before and pass them off as a new employee because they're not going to see them again. And so you bring in Bob, you say, hey, Bob's new here, and he would love to know what you like best about our software, or what you don't like, or what we can do for you. And especially if there aren't other people in the room, but even if there are, the customer will often have this great conversation with Bob, in which they tell you a bunch of things that they assumed that you knew that you actually don't. The other thing, similarly, is to do that with the customer. If you ever see that they have a new employee or a more junior person, get that person, cull them from the herd and talk to them. So a lot of times, when we've dealt with customers in the past, in my distant past, I worked for a personal finance company. We made software for banks, and all the SVPs, everything has to be our way. Our bank is very different. None of our customers aren't like any other bank's customers, which is a total lie, by the way. You all have money. Rich people are like rich people. Not so rich people are like not so rich people. That's really the only distinction. But every time we had a new person, we would find a way to have a meeting with that person. We'd try and schedule a meeting. We'd make it at a time where we didn't think that the head honchos would come. Or we'd set it, oh, can we have a conversation tomorrow? The only people who can show up for meetings tomorrow are the new people, the junior people. But they have interesting ideas. And a lot of times they can also kind of tell you how to get in good with other people. So if you can find someone more junior, have a conversation with them, make it clear, like, I want to learn from you, you know, you're a little bit newer here, but you also kind of know the ropes of how things are working. What could I do? And kind of start from there as an opening point. So that's a good kickoff. Is there anything else that to play off that you'd like to ask?
I'll leave it there. Yeah.
All right, thanks. So, yeah, getting into customers takes a little bit of that creativity, and a lot of times people are set in a really different paradigm. So shaking that up in any way, you know, it could be even meeting people in a different place, not your office, at a conference instead. Those kind of things can really stem new conversations that aren't the ones that you typically have. So the next one up would be Emily.
Thank you. My name is Emily Mazzacurani. I'm the founder and CEO of 427. We help Fortune 500 companies identify climate change related risks in their operations and their supply chain. My customer development problem is that my people, the people that care about the problem that I'm trying to solve, and my network are the sustainability officers, they're the people who do environmental compliance and government affairs. They're not the risk managers. And getting to the risk managers and getting the risk managers to also see that as a risk is my challenge. How do I learn about this other group of people that has different habits, different interests, and that may not even know the folks that I'm in touch with because they're large companies and risk and green people don't necessarily talk to each other. Thank you.
Interesting. So another challenge that, you know, risk and you know, environmental people may not exist in a lot of your customer bases, but I can almost guarantee that you do have situations where there's someone who's interested in your product and someone else who needs it, someone who's interested and someone else who writes the check. And you can actually think of that a little bit like a multi-sided market, which is there's one group of people that's probably easier to get to. So, you know, in your case, the sustainability people are probably answering your emails right away. Yes, we care about this a lot. It's great to find out about them, but that is the easier thing. So what you have to think about is what's motivating the other market that you need to get to. And it's probably not going to be sustainability. We had a similar situation at Yammer and Microsoft where I was trying to get us to care about accessibility. Well, none of the product managers who made decisions about what we were going to build, that was not high on their priority list. No one wanted to say we hate accessibility, we don't want accessible software. They'd say we have all this other stuff too. And so it became a situation like, well, what do you care about? And in this case, for them, it's like we care about driving usage, we care about more people using the product. And so I was able to work with our analytics team and figure out this, you know, of our customer base, here's an estimated number of the customers that we have potentially, that, you know, the customers we have, and the number of offices they have in other countries where English is not the primary language. And so you do a little back of the envelope math, and you say, here's basically representing 10 million users that we can't access today because they do not use English as their primary communication language. Suddenly this became much more interesting. So from the perspective of the people who care, the risk people, it's how do they decide that something is important today? And again, you know, I'll repeat the same thing about talking to junior level people. Entry level people are more willing to tell you the secrets because no one ever treats them like experts. And everyone likes being an expert. So you find your junior level compliance person and you say, hey, what does your boss care about? Why does she care about that? How did she make the decision to care about that? What was the number or the rule or the law that makes this important? And try and figure out what characteristics you can share with that. Some people respond to numbers, some people respond to legal threat, everyone responds to something, but you have to figure out what that thing is. And it's often easiest to do that independently of your product. So you're not talking about selling your product, you're not talking about learning about your product, you're just, I want to know more about this kind of person and what makes them tick. Sorry, any follow-up?
Do you have any tips? I like the tip of bring a new person and have your clients to do that. Do you have any tip on how you would find the type of client they're trying to research? In my case, not a suburban noun, but a risk officer of a Fortune 500 company, and done with them, and how do you, any advice on how to do that?
Finding people with a specific job title, LinkedIn. Go through LinkedIn, find someone, ask friends to refer you. There's a template in my book about how to write please forward this email onto your contact so I can get in touch with them. But again, people who are at the more junior level are going to be more receptive to those outreaches. Probably someone in your network is connected to someone who's connected to a risk officer. It's going to take more work to get through them, but you really only need to do it once, because that one person can probably find you other people like them. I totally recommend the LinkedIn Premium subscription for this. In general, I don't use it for anything, but the ability to send in mails is pretty awesome. And I've gotten a lot of really good feedback from people that way. So I said that internal to customers was a little bit like a multi-sided market. So we should move next to Alicia, who really is dealing with a multi-sided market.
Hi, my name is Elisha, and I'm the CEO and founder of Broadening, an online marketplace where you can find teachers. So it is a two-sided marketplace, so in terms of customer development, that is difficult because I have two distinct sets of users, teachers and students. And even that, within a site, for the teacher sites, for example, I have sports teachers, I have programming teachers, and on the student side, I have parents buying for their kids, I have adults buying for themselves. So I have different pockets, different segments of users, and I don't have a systematic way of doing customer development. So that's my biggest challenge.
All right, so this is tough, but you kind of said the magic words there, which is a systematic way, which is you have a bunch of markets. Think of it as though you had one market, you were doing one product, and then again and again and again. So you're going to have a hypothesis for each set of people and talk to them one at a time. And a lot of times you may want to actually have one day be student day, one day be parent day, one day be teacher day. And so for each one, form a hypothesis, talk to a few people, validate. Now, because you have a lot, you probably don't want to do 20 interviews times 3 or 4 populations. So kind of intermixing them, like doing 3 one day here, 3 one day here, 3 one day here. Now stop and think, are there any big things that you need to reassess? And then keep going. The other thing is, in an ideal world, you'd magically be able to get both sides up at the same time. You have a lot of students and a lot of teachers. The thing that and I can't take credit for this, but other entrepreneurs I've talked to who are working with multi-sided markets is there's usually one market that's harder to get at. I don't know which it is in your case, but what? Students. Okay, so if students are harder to get at, then you're going to want to get the teachers first, because you can make more progress there, and so you can learn more, and you'll have a more fully formed hypothesis when you get to that harder population. Similar things I've seen in healthcare. Doctors are almost impossible to get to, so if there's anyone else in your market, you should talk to those people first and learn as much as possible. Let's see, what else can I say about this? Another thing I'd say is to leverage when you talk to one person, have them refer you to other people. So you're forming your hypothesis, you're figuring out the hardest people and kind of like saving those a little bit for last, but there is a certain amount of seesawing back and forth that can help, because then you can refer other things. You can say to the teacher, hey, I've talked to 20 students this week, and here's the thing that I'm hearing from them. How does this relate to problems that you might have? Are you aware of this? Is this something you can work with? So it does take longer, but the beauty of a multi-sided market is it's a lot harder for people to compete with you once you've made some progress. Is there anything else you'd like to?
So in this case, how does it work as a sprint? Or is it like a lifestyle, just 3 of each group every week kind of thing? Or do I just focus on nailing what, say, parents who are interested in sports instructor, just nail that first, and then move on to another section? Or should I just do 3 a week every day?
development is going to have a lot to do with how you'll actually do it. I have a lot of recommendations about things, but I find that if you don't like my style of doing things, the risk is that you won't do it and you'll do something else instead. But I would say that the point of a multi-sided market is it's kind of like a bridge. You can't build the bridge partway over without that connecting piece. So if you learned everything there was to learn about parents who wanted sports counseling or computer science tutoring, but there was no one to support that, it would be fundamentally worthless. So yeah, a little bit at a time. In terms of whether you schedule it to have like a day of customer development and then a day of something else is totally dependent on what's most comfortable for you. I would often find it easier to set up like a day of talking to marketers or a day of talking to product managers, just because I was kind of in that mindset. I referenced LinkedIn. If I'm using LinkedIn, I'm just doing one search and working my way down all the people with that job title, or I'm talking to one person and asking them to refer me to others. So I might do a chunk of that and then think about it and then do a chunk the next day. But really, it's mostly about what will actually get you out of the building and talking to people. And most people tend to think that they don't have multi-sided markets, and you usually do. There's usually a stakeholder who's invisible. In a lot of your cases, it's not going to be as critical. It's not going to be a 50-50, but there's going to be things like, this is the team who uses your product, but this is a team who it changes their life a little bit. And it's useful to get at least a little bit of insight into that. Sometimes you can do it in a less time-dense way than interviews. Occasionally you can do things like surveys or just ask one person and then do a survey based off that person. But those little stakeholders tend to matter a lot, and a lot of companies are undone by not thinking about those things. So, again, you guys are all setting this up well, because that segues into the next thing, which is Ashley, who is talking about how to fit customer development into an existing process. And I'll walk to the end here.
I work on a product called Waffle, and it's a work tracking tool for software developers. We've been around for about a year, and we have a good group of early adopters, so we get a lot of feedback from when we go to ship new features that are in high demand or solving a problem that we have customer need for. One of the problems that we have is we do a lot of upfront customer development to figure out how the best way to solve the problem. Show people mock-ups, target a subset of users, and some of our early adopters get feedback. Then we release it, and a bunch of people hate it or broke their workflow. So how do we best take that feedback, work it back in, get our engineers working on stuff that they already, we did all that upfront effort on. Do you have any tips on how to best deal with that situation?
Sure. So this is kind of a problem after my own heart, because I am now in an enterprise and we do a lot of this sort of thing. We learn a lot about a feature that we think is going to be important, and we build it and then we release it, and everyone is kind of waiting for their to be patted on the back, and that never actually happens. So first of all, it's just there's a certain importance about building a culture around celebrating learning versus those accolades, because you're not going to get them, and that's kind of a lost cause. When we talk about, look, we learned this really interesting thing, and getting, finding some confederates and other teams that will help with that. But, to the ongoing point, there's a couple of things that you can do to mitigate that and to recover from it. So first of all is when you're building a feature based on things that customers have asked for, the first thing that we always try and make sure is we understand why they're asking for it and how it will affect their workflow. So to say, okay, that's interesting that you'd like a new bug tracking, flag. If you had that, what would you be able to do? Who would use it? In the last week, how many times would you have used this? And get at kind of those details, because that can reveal a lot. It might be something that someone asked for and they don't realize that actually 20 people use it, and this person is giving you their version according to their workflow and not everyone else's. So understanding that pretty deeply. We also tend to, if possible, we'll show early mocks to people. Now mocks it's a little bit over, you can't over-rely on that, because interaction is often the thing that's most important, especially with something like a workflow tool where you're operating on muscle memory a lot. So There's a limited amount you can get from mocks, but we'll do paper prototypes, for example, and we might literally just walk over to someone and have them walk through it. So if you had a couple of customers that you liked particularly, who were located close to you, showing them the paper and saying, like, how would you do this? And you can see a lot from body language, and people are kind of going, and they're not even tapping the paper, they're just hovering over it, then there's probably something a little bit wrong. The other thing is just to, when people get it for the first time, watch them use it. Watch where they're hesitating, ask what they have to relearn, and try and focus on, is this something that they hate because it's different, or is there a catastrophic change, like what used to take 2 clicks now takes 5 clicks and now takes 5 minutes, and learn that distinction. The other thing is just customers will complain. And there's a certain degree to which we don't want to demonize them. It makes me very angry when I hear people talk about their dumb customers or their angry customers, like they just don't get it. That's a very toxic attitude. But to normalize the fact that customers complain. Happy customers complain. That sounds like an oxymoron. But a product that you don't use, you don't bother to complain about. You just stop using it gradually over time until you find something else and it goes away. Products that you love, you complain about it. All you have to do is read any Apple fanboy message board to know that. Apple's got the most passionate users ever, and they complain about everything. It's because we rely on our phones. People keep their phones within 3 feet of them 90% of the time. Of course we're going to complain about things. So letting people know that complaint is healthy, that complaint means people rely on your software, that can be really, really rewarding. We have engineers do note-taking for us on customer development conversations because we know that engineers are almost never going to want to go talk to customers themselves, but if you give them a task, they will do that, especially a task that has a time limit. This will be a half an hour. We're going to call someone on the phone. Here is a template. You can take notes because I can't do a good interview and take notes at the same time. So we have people do that. They always complain the first time. By the second time, they're like, okay, keep me on the list for these. Because that's really valuable to not only hear customers complaining, but hear them in context. So this customer complained, and then at the end, inevitably, will say something like, how likely would you be to recommend this to a friend? And you're like, oh, 9 out of 10. You're like, okay, that's hearing those things. You can say it all you want, but hearing a customer actually do that, this sucks, this sucks, this sucks. Oh, I tell everyone to use it all the time. That's really, really valuable. And the more you can spread that throughout your team, the better. Any follow-ups? All right, thanks. The volunteering engineers to do things, we had to bribe them with cupcakes the first time. That works really well. Come, take notes, get a cupcake. So I recommend that. You don't need to do it all the time. We don't give most of them cupcakes anymore. All right, let's see. How are we doing on time? We're still pretty good. Emmanuel, who is buying from us? Our marketing is kind of scattershot. I'll let you reword that though.
Yes, thank you. My name is Emmanuel Leah, and my sister and I started a product about 2.5 months ago, SatMyCaps.com, and the problem we're trying to solve is the bad hair day by preventing our customers from having to wake up with a case of bedhead. So we launched our product. We thought we had our target demographic, who we were going to sell to. We set up our marketing, and it didn't really go so well. At the same time, we had a YouTube blogger actually feature us, and it just blew up. Completely different demographic we never planned for, weren't sure how to handle it. Sold out of all of our inventory, and even before we finished making the next set, we had 350 pre-orders. So it was clear that was our new, where we were going to go. The problem we have now is we're not really sure who's buying from us and how to market to them, and it's really scattered, and we're just a team of pretty much just 2 of us, 4 different e-commerce storefronts, 5 different social media channels, and it seems overwhelming, a little overwhelming to figure out how do we reach our customers and develop them.
Great. This is actually a problem that hits big companies too. We don't really know who's buying from us, or we don't know who's getting the most value from our product a lot of the times. So this is something that never fails to surprise me. The customers that you think are the most, your product is the most indispensable, they'd die if they couldn't have it, they're never who you think they are. And so there's a lot of value in just asking. So in some cases, you might have something like a customer mailing list where you have email addresses or phone numbers for people who are your customers today. That's the best possible scenario because it's easy to get a hold of them. If not though, the interesting thing about your best customers is that they will go out of their way to talk to you. So something like, you know, a tweet that says, hey, do you love our product? Have you bought this for yourself or other people? Let us know, and we'll send you something, a coupon, you know, here's a cool article, or even just, we're 2 people, and we'd love to talk to you, help us out, because we like to do that. And I can say, you know, now especially my job's gotten harder because no one wants to help out Microsoft. That's no fun at all. But helping out a 2-person company is something everyone will go out of their way to do. In fact, that's another useful hack. If you are from a big company and you're ever reaching out to people, use your name. Don't say so-and-so research, don't say so-and-so support, don't say product. No one cares about that, and no one wants to answer that. People respond to things from Cindy. They don't respond to things from Microsoft Research. That's terrible. So anyhow, you know, reach out, tell us who you are. So that's your first step. Find out who the people are who are buying your product a lot, using your product a lot, or who are willing to respond to a tweet or a Facebook post or something like that. Now that you have those people, you ask them 2 questions. What do you like best about our product? How does it make your life better? Like something along those lines. What is the most value? What is the single best thing about us? And it's almost always surprising, and it's usually not, if you build software, it's usually not the thing that was the most engineering complex and took you 6 months to build. Sometimes it's the thing that took you 5 minutes. And Keaton is in the room. When I worked with him at Kissmetrics, I remember someone did a bug fix that made it easier to bookmark URLs within the product. I think it literally took an engineer 2 minutes to write and check in, and I got a stream of emails from people being like, this is the best thing ever! You know, people were tremendously happy for this ridiculously small thing. So find out what that is that they love about you, and then the other one is, how would you describe it to someone you were recommending it to? If you were telling a friend that this product is great, how would you describe the value you get out of it? And use their words, because your words are terrible. Your words are marketing words. Your words are the words of someone who knows this product inside and out, and no one resonates with that. It sounds like marketing. But when people say, I love this product because it saves me so much time, it makes me feel powerful, it makes me, you know, be able to do this, it makes my job go easier, those words that they're using will appeal to other people as well. And I was at that personal finance company, and we did a big redesign, and we were trying to figure out how to market, and we talked to people about what they liked best about it. And we were thinking it was going to be technology-related things. This was Yodlee, and we powered Mint. So if any of you use Mint.com, basically the cool stuff about Mint, but not quite as well designed, was the stuff we were talking about. And so we thought, automatic transaction categorization. That's so awesome. People will love that. Automatically figuring out what percentage of your net worth is in which place and displaying a pie chart. That's what people will talk about. The thing that people said universally, I love this. It gives me a feeling of control. And that's the most hand-wavy, wishy-washy thing I've ever heard of. I never would have said this gives me a feeling of control. When we put that on the website, use this and take control of your finances, we saw signups just go through the roof. It's ridiculous. No one in the entire company would have come up with that word, but that was the word that worked. So when you talk to your customers, the people who are out there watching your YouTube video and buying this product for them or 10 of their friends, and they say, I love this because, you know, I've never had a bad hair day since, or I don't even have to think about how I roll up. Whatever their words are, use it. Yeah. Anything else? All right. We have one minute. All right. And Jamie. Do we have Jamie here? Going once? Going twice? All right, anyone else in the audience have something? I'll pick someone on the spot. I saw a hand go flying. Sorry, photographer, I'm walking right past you. All right.
So my name is Chris Hodge, I work with Intuit, and the question I have is, so we've got a two-sided market, right? And we're staying very narrow on acquiring customer. So narrow that the opportunity base is about 700 people. And so we're running rapid experiments, but the problem is we bring them into the kitchen, right? So they can see, we get the feedback. We're struggling with, we don't want to keep experimenting with the same groups. They get polluted, they don't know the jig is up yet, right?
actually works for you, which is we have a little bit of a similar problem at Yammer. We A/B test all the features it's a product that's launched, but we're A/B testing features. But there's not that many people who are active users who use lots and lots of features. So we run into the same problem. Are we testing on the same 500,000 people? And at that point, like after you do that for long enough, you start worrying about the same 500,000 people making decisions on your product. So one of the things that we have done is to look for parallels of non-customers, which I think is a little bit analogous to non-target market, and say, what's the problem we're solving? How are people solving a similar problem to like this in a different domain? So, for example, we started talking to people about how they managed email. And we don't do email functionality, but a lot about how you tackle your workflow has to do with email. We started watching people using to-do lists. We started looking at people doing actually like pen and paper lists and trying to understand a little bit about this thing that you're doing, this one-step abstracted thing, what's frustrating you about it, what's working about it, and then we're extrapolating back and we're hoping that it's not getting too distorted.
So when you do that and you look at an analog or something very similar context, do you still just, all right, we'll just roll and see how it behaves, and if it just comes up belly, then it's like, oh, okay, we just know maybe like they didn't want email functionality and this, or it's just too soon. I guess that's the question. We thought about that, but we have to pull the trigger on that.
So when we get feedback, we basically say, we always keep in mind what our product vision is, and then we kind of say, does this fit in line with it? Can we interpret from these results that people have a hard time keeping track of things, or that people feel self-conscious about certain behaviors, or just that people are very time constrained? Like, for one thing, we talked to a bunch of people working in retail. Oh, they're not core Yammer customers because they don't sit in front of a computer all day. But we wanted to understand how they dealt with problems. And we found that actually people working in retail situations are just like very extreme versions of information workers. They're like you on your busiest day where you have a meeting and then you've got another meeting in 2 minutes and you're trying to do things on your phone and walk and talk at the same time. So the problems they had, we say, well, this is just like them magnified, and they're having a problem typing in long messages. Maybe that means we should make the voice dictation. I mean, you can voice dictate right now, but it's not obvious. Maybe we should make that obvious. Or a lot of these people are taking photos and sharing them, and the reason that they're doing that is because they feel self-conscious about typing a message. So, maybe other people feel that way too. Maybe we should just look at making photo sharing really easy, because once you photo share, then the friction is down. So we're going to roll it into the core product and test it out on normal people, on those same people. But we're also kind of shifting new users versus existing users. So the new users is a much smaller target base, so it's a bad A/B testing sample. But we're kind of accepting that it's not as good data and saying, if something works really, really well for new users, but maybe less well for this polluted population, we're going to put a little thumb on the scale of the new users. So cool. We went through some problems. I think we're probably running low on time, but if anyone has anything quick, I can add in one more thing here. I see a hand in the back of the room. Way in the back of the room.
Thanks. Our challenge is twofold. We're a 7-year-old not-for-profit that's developed a considerable amount of IP in learning games, in part with the Gates Foundation, thank you very much, who is now trying to reach two distinct audiences. You spoke earlier a little bit about how to reach some of the educational market. Our take is a little different. We're not trying to reach students per se, but crack the nut more of district sales, which has its own barriers. But equally so, when we do want to sell directly to consumers or to educators, our barriers are that there are no rating systems, and iTunes and Google Play and others carry a variety of things that label themselves as educational, but there's a few, if any, validators of that for the consumer, whether it's child, parent, or educator who wants to bring something into their classroom.
So let's think about this. We have a challenge of we have a product, we're trying to validate that the product is actually useful for people, but there's not really a assigned authority. they're doing today. There's a couple of interesting edge cases which would be, there's not a lot of them, but people who are curriculum planners for, say, private schools tend to be looking at a lot of information. Homeschoolers also tend to be looking, like, scouring the internet and looking for places. So I'd say I might try and see what sources those people are going to and see if there's any way to tap into them, or if those people know people you could talk to. Another thing would be if there are things that are getting through, like successful, say, what's the Donor's Choice, for example. If there's a successful Donor's Choice campaign, people, Donor's Choice, yes, who've run a campaign and it's worked, and they would be willing to talk to you about what worked. Or if there are cases where someone, bought software and introduced it into technology, was there something that made that decision easier? And I think an analog, which is a little bit removed, is I remember when we were trying to get people to install software, we found that one of the big barriers was that they would say, oh, it's just a line of JavaScript. Well, the person who puts that JavaScript in is an engineer, and that engineer, when you ask them to put something in, no matter how short it is, you say, well, if someone were to ask you to install one line of JavaScript on our website, what would you worry about? And they got a whole list of things. They're like, oh, well, if I saw this email, I'd probably see it when I was walking on my phone, but I wouldn't answer it right now because I'd want to get home and I'd want to inspect the JavaScript and make sure it wasn't bad. I'd want to run it and see how many cycles it took. Was it going to slow things down? I want to ask, will it work with this other thing that I already have? In short, there was a whole list of things that they needed to think about before they could say yes or no. And we actually wrote up an FAQ predicting all of those things and we told product managers, here you go, here's an email. Don't just send the code, send this to your developer, and we preempted most of their questions. And that did help a lot with kind of buying in. So I feel like purchasing software might be the same thing of people saying, we can't do it because it's hard to expense, because it has no validators, because we don't know anyone else who's used it. Whatever those things are, if you can find them and preemptively address some of them, that's something that's worked.
Can you do that directly in your sales pitch, or to a site where there's more about that?
I would probably put it on the site, but I would also use the opportunity during a sales pitch to make it a little bit more like an interview and say, here's some stuff we've learned from other people who are buying technology. Does this resonate with you? And they might say, no, I don't care about this thing at all. And now you have another piece of data. And when you talk about people's problems more as opposed to, hey, we have a thing to sell you, more often than not, the conversation ends with, so I do kind of want to buy this thing, or at least want to learn more about it. So, sell a solution, yeah. All right. So hopefully this has been helpful to more of you so you can think about how your specific problems can be addressed in this way. A lot of this stuff is just really kind of creative problem solving that may or may not have been done before. When you're stuck with things, for things that I haven't addressed, and I know there's tons of problems that you might all run into that I haven't addressed. This sounds silly, but my best piece of advice is find another smart person who isn't you and ask them. Because non-experts are really good at coming up with solutions because they don't know what's actually possible. And I talked about engineers being listening in and taking notes on our customer development sessions. A lot of times they'll come up with a solution that ends up working or is the germ of something that works because they don't know design theory, they don't know typography, they don't know whatever the thing is, they just know that this seems useful. And the same thing works for physical products and hardware and software. It's I don't know how my TV works, and that means that I'm actually not going to give you a suggestion that's constrained by the knowledge of how it works. I'm going to say something that's crazy, but since you do know how that product or industry works, you can take that crazy thing and kind of rejigger it until it's something that works. So if you're a big company, find someone, find friends in another department and ask them. If you have new employees joining, they're an awesome source of asking questions and showing ideas because they're eager to please. They're a new employee, but they also don't know anything about your company yet. So we're good friends with the onboarding people, my research team, and so we ask every week, who's starting that's new, and inevitably we will be at their desk. Hi, welcome to Yammer. Let me show you some paper prototypes. Or hi, how would you solve this problem? And we get really good results out of that. If you're early stage, if you're just starting up, just find a friend, find an accountability buddy. That's good for you anyways because it's going to be hard to do this stuff, and and someone questioning you is going to be helpful. But that person might say, I don't know anything about education, but, could you try doing this thing? And that thing will be probably a good source. Thank you all, and, good luck, and I hope you enjoy